started. Thanks, guys, for being a part of this. And we hope that you'll find this encouragement. So we're going to jump right in. 3 steps for reading the Bible for all it's worth. I don't know if you have one of these, but I do. It's one of these thick old big Bibles. This is called a study Bible. And you just start looking at this thing and you're like, this is crazy big. I don't know if I could ever get this or understand this. If you've ever tried to read the Bible, sometimes people start at the very beginning and there's some really good, interesting stories there. Adam and Eve, Noah and the ark, and we've heard a couple of these things. And then you start getting into stuff that you're like, I don't know. This book can be kind of intimidating. So what I want to give to you tonight is just 3 easy steps for reading the Bible for all it's worth. And we hope that these steps will be an encouragement to you, and I'll give you some resources all along the way. So step 1 for reading the Bible for all it's worth is simply look. So look at it. How do you start? Where do you start? What's the first thing I need to do? Well, you just need to start reading. And it's just something that you have to get into. While the Bible may be intimidating, it is easy to understand. So it is a letter from God to you and me, and He wants us to be able to understand this letter. He wants us to be able to understand this book. So jump in. You know, it's better to get started than to kind of keep putting it off and say, hey, I'm not going to be able to understand it, so I'm not going to read it. The opposite is true. Just start reading it. Whether you start in Genesis or whether you start in Matthew, step number 1 is to look. But as you're in step 1, let me give you a bigger word. Use your powers of observation. So when you look at it, you're going to observe. And when you're observing, you're simply seeing what is there. In some of the books of the Bible, you're looking at history, or you're looking at stories, or you're looking at poems. In all of those places, you're going to want to see who the characters are, what is being talked about, what's the plot of the storyline. Like any other book, you're going to be able to just make observations. So as you read, you start to identify what's happening and what's going on. And you want to see the topics that are being brought up. So in step 1, you're looking at it, you're observing it, and you're just simply, there's nothing you're going to accomplish other than putting your eyes on the page and recognizing the words. So let me give you an exercise with each of these steps. So step 1 is look. What's the exercise? What can you do while you're looking at the Bible? Well, you can mark it up. So I like to mark in the Bible. Maybe you remember in your English class when your teacher was teaching you about verbs and nouns and pronouns, you had to underline things and circle things and double underline and parentheses. Same idea in the mark it up exercise. You kind of take your Bible and you start to mark it up. I'm not sure if you can see this, but this is just a couple of examples. Like there's some things that are circled and underlined. So as I was reading or as I was studying or looking at this stuff, I just started to notice things. Some people will write notes or draw arrows in their Bible to connect things, and you're just using your pen to help you make observations. That's the first step, is simply seeing what is there. So as you're reading and as you're doing first step, the second easy step for understanding the Bible is to then think about it, to interpret it, to try to understand it. So as you're looking at it, you're going to start making observations, and that's going to lead you naturally into this next step, which is asking questions. So during step number 2, you start asking questions of what you are observing. And as you ask questions, you start to identify answers. So one of the first things you want to ask yourself as you're reading and observing is, who wrote this? And who is it written to? So God used human authors in specific times and specific circumstances. So if you're reading a psalm in the middle of the Bible, that's a poem. Most of them are written by David. And so he's writing a poem for other people to sing. So it's a musical composition. So that helps when you're reading the Bible. If you're in the New Testament, you could be reading a letter. If you're in the beginning of the Old Testament, you could be reading a history book. And all of those things get read a little bit differently. But when you know what you're reading and who you're reading, who wrote it and who they wrote it to, it starts helping you understand it. You can start asking questions like who and why and how all along the way. So as you're asking questions and you're in this second phase and you're just trying to understand it, well, what's the goal? In your first step, you were just kind of identifying the topics. This is talking about love, or this is talking about Jesus, or this is talking about brokenness. Well, in the second step, you're now saying, all right, what's the truth that's being shared in here? And I'm trying to think about it. I'm trying to ask questions and get answers so I can identify the true topics. And And in any verse or in any chapter, there's going to be a lot of truth. There's going to be a bunch of topics that are going to be explained and truth that's going to be given. And so you're going to identify those truths. Well, how do you know when something's a truth topic, a truth principle? If it fits this kind of explanation, then it's truth. If it's true for everyone, everywhere, in every time. There's some things in the Bible that are just true for the characters from the Bible times. And they're not necessarily true for us today. So that's part of the story, but it's not a principle that carries over today. For example, we don't go around sacrificing sheep to God today. That was something that happened in the Old Testament with some other characters. It was for a particular time, for a particular reason. I can learn about it. I can see why they did it, why it was something that happened, and what it was for them that was worshipful about that. But it's not something that I'm supposed to do today. So just because they sacrificed a lamb in the Bible then doesn't mean it's a truth principle for me today. But I am supposed to worship God. I am supposed to offer things to God. And so there are things when I'm reading that I can identify as a truth principle for today. So when I'm done with the 3 steps, I'm going to give you a little chart or a little graph that might help you understand this a little bit more. So thanks for jumping in. Thanks for joining. Like things along the way. Let us know where you're listening from. We're talking about 3 easy steps for reading the Bible. And if you have any questions, go ahead and write those things in. We'd love for you to do that. If you take a second to share on Facebook that this is happening, that would really help the video and it'd be encouraging to me. So we've talked about our first 2 steps. Number 1 is observe it, look at it, see what's being talked about. Number 2 is to think about it, start asking questions and get answers so you can identify the true topics. And that's something, true principles. That's something that's true for everyone, everywhere, and every time. So if you're asking questions, you're trying to read something and you really don't understand it, where do you go to get answers to those questions? Well, let me give you a couple of resources. Number 1, you could get your hands on what's called a study Bible. A study Bible has not only the Bible in it, it also then has notes for what you read. So in some parts of a study Bible, as you're reading it, you may find half of it is scripture and then half of it is explanation or cross-referencing other things that happen in the Bible. So these notes can be very helpful to explain words, to explain situations, to explain circumstances. So a really good study Bible, and this ESV study Bible is one of the best out there. It also has online stuff that you can use, charts and graphs that will just explain things all along the way. So here's a page that has some charts on it. And you just find some of this. Here's some maps. You find things pretty interesting. So study Bibles can help. There's also tools that you can buy, commentaries if you want. We're starting a study in 1 Corinthians at branchlife.church. You can join us on Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Except for this next Sunday, it's Super Bowl Sunday. We're actually partnering with another area church so that our service can be on Sunday morning. So we're having 2 Sunday mornings this next week at 9 at 10:45. 1 week only, Super Soul Sunday. You can get something like a commentary, and commentaries are just deeper explanations. Sometimes they're big like this, sometimes they're small books. And they can help you kind of understand some stuff that's going on. You can always ask Google, of course, with the internet. There's all kinds of things out there, so you're going to learn what's a trusted source and what's not a trusted source. A lot of times in Google searches, if it's coming up under Desiring God or gotquestions.org, those are great places to try to find some answers or 9 marks. But a study Bible, a commentary, ask Google, ask your pastor, ask your small group leader, bring it up. There's not really a wrong way to go about it. As long as you've asked the question, you can then try to answer it over a period of time. Some answers are easy to find, some answers are harder to find, but that's part of the fun in studying the Bible. So that's the second step. Think about it. Try to looking to understand and interpret the meaning of the Bible. Let me give you one more thing in this step. Some people like to ask the question about the Bible, what does it mean to you? Or what does it mean to me? And that can be a very misleading question. The truth that is there is the truth. It's true for everyone, everywhere. You're not going to have different truths for different people. So you are looking for the same truth principles. You're trying to identify the things that God is saying are true and what God is saying is false. So it's not going to mean something different for you than it is for me. It's similar to like when you're reading Shakespeare and you start to read Shakespeare and someone's like, oh, I think it means this. And someone else goes, no, I think it means this. Well, how do you know what it means? it means what the author intended it to mean. So whatever God wanted it to mean, that's the truth. Whatever the human author was giving on behalf of God, that's the truth you're trying to find. So what's the truth that's there? Now, you can take that truth and you can apply it in different ways. So it can do something different in your life than it would in my life. But the truth principle is the same for everyone, everywhere, and every time. It can't mean two different things. It's got to mean what is the truth there. Now, there can be many truths that are expressed, but there are still the truths that are intended by God for us to understand. So when you're reading the Bible, you're just trying to understand that. Whether it's the moral of the story, whether it's a direct command, whether it's the meaning of a poem, all of those things come up as you read the Bible. So first, you just look at it, you observe, see what the topics are. Second, you think about it, you interpret it, you meditate it, you chew on it, ask questions, get answers, identify truth principles. Remember, I've got a graph for you coming up at the end. The third thing that you do when you're studying the Bible is you then take it and you do it. You apply it. So studying the Bible is unique from most other books or most other forms of books because it's not just something that we want to do to entertain ourselves. It's something that we want to do to better ourselves. So God intended us not just to look at the Bible, not just to make it be something that we do academically in our head, but it's supposed to change our lives. If you read in the book of James, in the very first chapter, it says, "Be doers of the word, not hearers only." We're supposed to look at the Bible like a mirror, and we're supposed to see ourselves in it and see the truth and then fix what we see, correct what's there. So that's what the third step is so important. So when you're reading the Bible and you've identified something that's true, you then ask yourself, what does this mean for me now today? And I can now take the deep truths that God is giving me, like he's good, like he's all-knowing, like he's all-powerful, like prayer changes things. And then I can say, how does this matter to me today? Well, if prayer changes things, then somehow prayer's got to be a part of my life. And it's got to be something that I do on a regular basis. So how do I pray? And then you start learning as you read more in the Bible about those things. So you're looking at, you're thinking about it, and now you are doing it, you're applying it. So the exercise that I want to give you for the third step is simply writing down what's called an action statement or an action plan. And these again, they don't have to be long, but it's giving yourself a homework assignment. So I've read this, I know that it's true, and I've figured out how this can matter to me today. So the Bible will say something like, love your neighbor as yourselves, or forgive us this day our daily bread as you forgive our debtors. And you've told us to be forgiving. So I may have to give myself a homework assignment that involves me forgiving somebody that I'm stinking mad at. And I may read this passage about forgiveness and God forgave me and he wants me to forgive and love others, and yet I'm like really mad at my neighbor who yelled at my kids. So I've got to say, all right, here's my action step for today. Today, I'm going to forgive my neighbor. I'm going to let that go. I'm going to try to understand what that means in my life. I'm going to apply that to them. I'm going to love my neighbor. Maybe I'll even take another step and I'm going to do something kind for my neighbor or my friend or my coworker. And you give yourself an action statement. Now, the best action statements or the best homework assignments are specific. They have a time stamp on them, so when you're going to do it. They are action-oriented. There's an assignment that you're going to do, and they're measurable. Did you do it well or did you not do it well? So I can say my action statement is I'm going to forgive people. That's not a great action statement, although it's a nice thought. A more specific statement is tomorrow I'm going to talk to my neighbor and let them know that, well, maybe that would be kind of an awkward situation. I'm going to write my neighbor a note and thank him for what he's done for me. Something along those lines. Very specific, homework assignment, happens during a specific time, and I know if I did it or didn't do it. So that's something that I can do in my life. I can write myself a little note and post it on my refrigerator or post it on my mirror. But it gives me a do step, something that I'm going to accomplish. Maybe it's something I'm not going to do, or something I'm going to do more of, or something I'm going to be encouraged by. Maybe I'm going to take what I learned and as I was reading it, I actually thought this could be an encouragement for someone else. So my action step is going to be to share this verse or to post it or to talk about it in a public forum in some way, shape, or form. And that can all be very, very encouraging. Maybe I'm going to sing a song. Maybe I'm going to worship and have some quiet time with God. There's just millions of ways that we can apply these truths to our lives and our different situations. So a really good question here is, how are you going to do this? How does this truth change your life or change you in little or big ways today? And when you read the Bible following these 3 steps, observation, interpretation, application, look at it, think about it, and do it, the Bible comes alive and it becomes something that transforms your life. And when you follow the truths of the Bible, you will see it do amazing and incredible things in and for you. So let me go through these 3 steps one more time, and I'm going to show you a little drawing that might help this stick, or a little graph. So there's 3 steps that we do when we're studying the Bible. The first step is I'm going to look at it. So what you're doing when you're looking at the Bible in the first step is you are looking at the Bible in its context and in its time. You're looking at what we call the Bible island. So I'm looking at it and I'm seeing what's true for them there. They had sheep and shepherds and little flat roofed houses and birds that flew in the sky. And I'm seeing what happened in the Bible times. I'm just observing it. I'm looking at the characters. I'm looking at the setting and the place. In step number 2, I'm now thinking about it. So what step number 2 does is it allows me to bridge the Bible island with today. So step 2 is thinking about the truth that is there for everyone, everywhere, and every time. So I'm asking questions and I'm getting answers, and I'm bridging things. There's lots of things that we have to get over, like the time difference, like the geography difference, like the language difference, and the cultural differences. And we have to see what stays on the Bible island and what comes over to us. What comes over to us is true for everyone, everywhere, in every time. So I'm thinking about the meaning, the truth behind the story. The third step then is to do it, to actually put it into practice today. And this is our island. This is our time. So we've gone from sheep and shepherds and little flat-roofed houses to large cities to McDonald's and airplanes and cars. And now I'm taking these truths and I'm putting them into my setting today. And I'm saying, how does this work today with my situation and my culture and my time? They didn't have iPhones, but I do. They didn't have airplanes, but I do. So how do these truths apply to me today? And I'm going to give myself a homework assignment, a specific homework assignment that's going to help me understand and do what God says I should do today. When God wrote the Word, He wrote it in this time setting, but He gave us truths that apply to everyone, everywhere. So 3 easy steps for reading the Bible. Number 1, look at it. Number 2, think about it. Just ask questions and do everything you can to get answers. And then number 3, do it and go after it. So you're going to open the Bible. You'll begin in the first chapter of a first book. If you have a good study Bible, you can see who wrote it, why they wrote it, and who they wrote it to, and you can just start reading. If you're brand new to the Bible, you're like, well, where do I start? What would be the first place I could read? I would recommend starting with Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. Those are the first 4 books in the New Testament, and they're going to just tell you the story of Jesus' life. We call it the gospel. So you're just reading a biography of Jesus' birth, life, death, resurrection, and ascension, and you'll be able to just have that be the first thing. And if you're like, which one of those 3 should I start with? Start with John, and you'll see all kinds of good things. Then I would jump into another book in the New Testament, something after that, like Acts or one of the letters. There you can go into the Psalms, and the Psalms are awesome. I have a book. We're going to be studying Psalms this summer, Songs of the Summer. We're going to study Psalms at Branch Life Church, and so I got a hold of this, and it's a psalm. It's just the Psalms, but it gives me the psalm, and then it gives me space to write a whole bunch of notes. So I'm getting excited to jump into Psalms, but that's like standalone Psalms, or Proverbs is a good way to start. That's wisdom. And there's 31 Proverbs. You can read 1 proverb a day, 1 chapter of Proverbs a day, and you'll get through that whole book in 1 month. 10 minutes a day, you could read through the Bible in an entire year. And if you do that and you get kind of a bird's eye view, that would be a great way to start, and you start reading and trying to understand these stories. The Old Testament is talking about the Messiah who's coming. It's pointing us towards Christ. The New Testament is talking about the Messiah who came, Jesus. And so he died and rose for us. And we are excited about jumping into one of the books in the New Testament at Branch Life, 1 Corinthians. So if you're at all interested in joining it, we have just started. Next week's week number 1, we're going to cover the first chapter and a little bit part of chapter 2. And if you're live and local, you can join us here in Pottstown at Branch Life. This coming week, we're going to be in the morning at Pewtown during Super Bowl. And then we're back at 5 p.m. The next week here locally. Join us live online. You can see these rebroadcasts. And we hope that these 3 steps are helpful for you. We're going to look at God's Word, make observations, think about it, try to interpret it, and then we're just going to do it. And anybody can read the Bible. God made it so that we all can understand it. So don't be intimidated by it, but allow it to come alive and transform your life. So I hope these things have been encouraging to you guys. Thanks for joining us tonight, and have a great evening.